Hi, this still isn't a wig. Stop asking. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going back to Kenner's Superpowers, which is a bit of a sub-series within this whole series. It's one where, I can't possibly go over every single, non-Wonder Woman character in the DC universe, but I do have certain, certain standards and rules that are very much self-imposed. And this is really the first one where I have to kind of like break my own rules, and that being the Villainesses of DC that we should have seen in the Superpowers line then as now. So let's just get right into Cheetah, Star Sapphire, and Giganta from Superpowers. We've already sort of looked over the history of Kenner's Superpowers, ad nauseum at this stage. In terms of these characters specifically in relation to prototypes, plans, memos, that kind of thing for DC Superpowers, I mean nothing. There was truly nothing when it came to villains of the female variety. The closest thing we would have gotten would have been, say, Catwoman's Catcrawler, not Catwoman herself, but just a vehicle. Was sort of bandied about in the early pitch, as well as a Bizarro Supergirl. So really, nothing, in terms of like the top dogs of DC's Villainesses, which is too bad because that's one sort of faction of DC that a lot of fans really are clamoring for. As for the characters I have selected, as well as select overall in this sort of sub-series, my North Star truly is the DC Style Guide. The Kenner Superpowers, both figures and the packaging, really reflected that style. However, from the Style Guide, there's really very few villainesses there. Truly, we have Cheetah, of course, who I think is a very popular, fan-requested character, as well as Catwoman, who we've already discussed. And so this is really sort of like the non-Gotham crew. The only other one who sort of appeared here and there throughout the early 80s would be Plastique, who, if you're asking who that is, good question. Not really, a top-tier villain who I would, consider doing a video on. So if you're a big die-hard Plastique fan, this is not your day. We'll start with the clear and obvious choice, that being Cheetah, who is a arch nemesis of Wonder Woman. She's a character who was created back in 1943 by Marston, who created Wonder Woman. She's a very classic character, a very long-term villain of Wonder Woman, despite having many different names. The first was a woman named Priscilla Rich, who was essentially just sort of a kind of a spoiled brat who put on a cheetah costume and just caused mischief for Wonder Woman. Not exactly an iconic version of Cheetah, but certainly one that, we very much associate with the Golden and Silver Age, and one who's, the look at least has really kind of, captured hearts and minds over the years. The second kind of more Bronze Age Cheetah was a woman named Deborah Domain, or Debbie Domain, who was in fact Priscilla's niece. Very similarly, rich brat, really cool costume though, really great look, almost, kind of Catwoman-esque. And very, reminiscent of the 80s. This is the character who I believe was the one highlighted in the Style Guide. And this is one where I think had she been in the Superpowers line, this is the version, this is the character who we would have met. Probably the most famous of the Cheetahs would be Barbara Minerva, who would be created in around 1987, post-crisis. She was one of Wonder Woman's earliest friends she met when coming to Man's World. She was a little bit snotty herself, but was an archaeologist who found herself cursed by a cheetah goddess in Africa, as one does. And she really became the sort of, bloodthirsty, murderous kind of, proxy of this cheetah god. Despite this murderousness, she was, one of Wonder Woman's oldest friends. And again, despite being, within sort of the evil trinity of herself, Lex, and Joker, she was, certainly not an anti-hero, but, she and Wonder Woman would occasionally, find themselves on the same side and, would really kind of, become reluctant allies quite often. Or, in Wonder Woman's case, very much someone who led with more with a hand than a fist. So, I mean, she definitely wanted to redeem her old friend. So they have a very complex relationship, but a very interesting one, a very nuanced one that I think, really kind of lent itself to her becoming the Cheetah that we all know and love. Although she never appeared in a Style Guide or in any kind of Kenner memos, my second character I decided to sort of throw in this list is Giganta. She is, like Cheetah, very much a Golden Age creation by Marston himself. She was a character who has a lot of various origins over the years, but I think sort of, generally accepted one is that she was a gorilla, usually from Gorilla City, much more in the Flash realm of things, who was evolved into a human, which is not how that works, although that's what Marston thought at the time. She's someone who, over the years is someone who can sort of grow in size to become a giant, giantess, essentially. She's also a very interesting character in the sense that she's usually someone, kind of villain for hire kind of thing. She's someone who kind of dates around both villains and heroes. She's sort of, just kind of an average gal who just happens to be really, really huge. Very kind of fun, interesting character. Again, not very much on the, classic villain side, but certainly like someone who lends herself to a lot of funny moments. I feel like she would be great for superpowers. Of course, you would want the Big'em version. So difficult to do. However, when, Gentle Giant was doing those, 12-inch jumbo superpowers, she would have been a great addition for that to actually slot into your original line. The last character I decided to include in this list is Star Sapphire, Carol Ferris. She's a character who, like Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, bore out of the Silver Age, appearing in 1962. Carol would appear early on as sort of like Hal's boss / love interest, but it would actually be later on that she would be kind of almost mind controlled by aliens named Zamorons, and she would be sort of almost infected with the violet light of their Star Sapphire, and that would sort of turn her into an arch nemesis of Green Lantern. Really interesting character in the sense that it's sort of the Catwoman trope, but sort of put on, turned on its head, because she was someone who was mind controlled. I mean, she was very much a love interest, and some would argue the final girl for Hal, but also as the Star Sapphire was essentially a completely different person who was an enemy of Green Lantern. And that's really why I chose her here. I mean, I just want more villains for Green Lantern. Although, frankly, in the years, especially since the seminal, Green Lantern Rebirth, Sinestro Corps War, Blackest Nights, she's really sort of become one of the, Rainbow Brigade of emotional spectrum rings. And sort of, has sort of taken back control of her mind. So when she does don the Star Sapphire persona, she is herself. She is Carol, and she really is the avatar of the Violet Light. Likewise, in recent times, she's much more, not even an anti-hero, but a full-on hero. I mean, time of recording, she is the kind of lantern of the Justice League. Again, none of these characters were even, seemingly conceived of in superpowers. I mean, it's possible in some backroom midnight meeting with a shoebox full of blow that, they were considered, but there's really no evidence of this. And that's unfortunate. And I think especially in the case of Cheetah, we only got Wonder Woman. It would be great if we actually got at least her main villain. That said, like I say with all final verdicts for Kenner Superpower videos specifically, I mean, if you want figures of these characters, there's plenty of options. Not a ton, but I mean, there's certainly like a lot of scales, a lot of styles. These characters are sort of, big deals within the DC universe, within, with the Wonder Woman lore. You've got options there. When it comes to superpowers, I'm not getting into the tot of it all, but, time of recording, we are sort of in a bit of a countdown, waiting for the license to lapse with McFarlane Toys and move over to Mattel. So there is a lot of hope and expectation that Mattel will, see what the fans want in many ways. That being, continue the superpowers line, but also just give us some damn women. And especially, I mean, these three would be great to, kick off things. I mean, we've already talked about Gotham City Sirens, but this is another great crew, at least to kick off things and sort of expand that world. So, fingers crossed, nothing to report here, but keep your eyes to the skies. And that'll about do it for the Villainesses of DC's superpowers. Characters that, I love a bad girl, even if most of them aren't really all that bad, which is a, common trope in modern DC comics. I want to thank you for watching, thank you for liking, thank you for commenting, subscribing, all those YouTube things. And I will see you next time on MIA 80s Studies.